Hey everybody, it is I, your instructor, Beverly. I've been a little lax on my lectures in the past 2 or 3 units, but I did want to talk about this one a little bit. I'm probably going to break it up into 2 different files because there's a lot here. The last part of the chapter talks about the incident command system, and so I do want to spend a little bit of time. I know that some of you that are in the service, are in public safety in some way, are familiar with incident command, but I want to talk about it a little bit as we really overview it and figure it out. So this is chapter 13, emergency incident management. And as I was looking at this, I was kind of glad in some ways that this unit or this topic comes close to the end of the book. We've talked about training, we've talked about prevention, we've talked about other aspects of the fire service and emergency services, and so it kind of brings it to this. But everything else was sometimes you look at importance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The importance of something as it comes earlier in the book. So maybe we're focusing a little bit less on emergency incident management. Again, I encourage you to go through the PowerPoints. I didn't look to see how many there are. I'm sure there's a lot, but go through those as well as you read in your book. But some of the things that we're going to be talking about is the management responsibility at an incident, the need for a plan at every incident. Look at some of the components of the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, and talk about ICS and list the positions in ICS. So like I say, the first half, we're going to talk a little bit about incident management. And you may be thinking to yourself, I'm a brand new firefighter, or I'm just a firefighter, or I'm not even a firefighter yet. What do I need to know about incident management? I just need to show up and do what they tell me to do. And that's not necessarily the case. Incident management is something that everyone plays a role in. You may see something that your incident commander does not see, or your newness to the scene or your newness to the job may help you see something that the incident commander doesn't see. So, and your opinion as a member of that team, a member of that crew, is important. And so it's important that everybody have a focus on incident management. All different types and sizes. Used to it was just strictly a house fire, but now, as you know, we go to wrecks, we go to hazmat incidents, we go to medical scenes, all of that, and those need a plan. They need some sort of management to make sure that we do no further harm and that we resolve the incident in an efficient and an effective fashion. So, and that's one of the reasons why we look at incident command as a system to help us do all of that. Common terminology, training, all of those things help us. Training with different agencies help us to resolve that situation in an effective and efficient fashion. You got to have a coordinated response, especially if you are looking at mutual aid, automatic aid, working with other agencies, police, fire, EMS, maybe even public health, or a hazmat crew from, a private hazmat crew or something like that. We look at incident command. It certainly has been tested a lot in a lot of different places. And for those of us that I didn't grow up with incident command, I remember first being introduced to incident command, and I thought, this is craziness. And now it's simply a way of life. It becomes very natural to those in fire and emergency services. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we go through and get closer to the end of this chapter. So we talk about incident planning. Every incident has to have a plan. You can't just go out there and freestyle it. That's what we used to do. everybody would bail off the truck and go do their own thing. And it was, as I look back now, it's very scary. So every incident has to have a plan that has to do with safety, that has to do with effective resolution, doing no further harm, and making sure that objectives are established. Now, you may say, I don't have time for all that, but you do. And it becomes second nature, and you will see the way people are able to do that. So that's the first step in any incident, is to have a plan. That plan begins formulation when you get the dispatch, the information that the dispatcher provides you with. It continues on your travel to that incident. Some of you live in areas where you have a pretty long response time, and so you have time to think about it as you travel, as you go on that emergency response, to formulate a plan based on the information that you have. Now, we also know that sometimes the information that we have is not the most accurate. Not a dispatcher's fault, truly. They can only relay the information that they're given. And when you think about what is a big fire to us, and then you think about what is a big fire to somebody that's never seen a fire before, it's going to be a big fire. And so, there's a lot of questions I do believe that our dispatchers ask that kind of paint a picture for us, but recognize that it's not always what it sounds like. And so as we formulate these plans, they have to be a little bit flexible. So developing objectives. This is, simply an objective is something toward which effort is dedicated, an aim or end of action or goal. And so what is our goal? We can talk in generalities. Our goal is to, we have 3 objectives: life safety, property preservation, and to stop the incident. And those are real general, but you may need more specific goals depending upon the incident. A hazardous materials incident, you may have different goals. A wildland incident, the objectives are a whole lot less, or a whole lot different than that urban house fire. So you need to make sure that objectives are clearly stated. And that's the incident commander's role. Keep in mind that, if you are responding, you're going to be the incident commander until the incident commander gets there, or a higher ranking officer, or however it works in your department. So once we have our objectives, then we have to come up with strategies and tactics to meet those objectives. It's as simple as that. So what are the strategies necessary? And this is the art of devising a plan to achieve the objectives, certainly. And this can be defined as the method used to coordinate our operations. How are we going to do this? Is this going to be a defensive mode or an offensive mode? Interior attack, exterior attack, however you want to call those. Do we need to, what about crew integrity? Is there a rescue situation that may kind of throws a wrench into standard firefighting operations? So we have to think about those strategies, and we're going to talk about those things a little bit more. And then the tactics are the actions that are taken to achieve the strategy. This is performing that interior search. This is ventilation. This is advancing hose lines, that sort of thing. So these are the actions. Think about it as a teeter. And we talk about this in many, many aspects. What's the goal or the objective? What's the strategy that we're going to use? And what are the tactics that we're going to use to achieve that strategy? One of the biggest pieces to me in a decision-making tool, if you will, is the concept of size up. Now, I've seen lots of cartoons about this. By the time we do everything we're supposed to do, it shows the house that's just in ruins or is simply ashes, and we're ready to now fight fire. But it comes with practice. But size up is very important. And again, like I said, all the information that you get from a dispatch, and even think about time of day, day of the week, daytime, nighttime, how that affects your response or how that's going to affect your strategy when you get there. This is one of the reasons we pre-plan businesses. Many of them are closed at night. So if we get dispatch at night, we don't have as big a concern for rescue. Many facilities have many more people, these people that run third shift or run 24/7, companies that do that. We need to know that. And then part of that size up too is to anticipate the probabilities. A traffic accident, what sort of access are we going to have? Or, it's nighttime. So how does that affect our response? Weather situations, how can that change things for us? What's our own situation? Are we responding in a truck by ourselves? Are we going to be the first due, first there, first on scene? How many people do I have with me? What is the capabilities of those people? What is the capability of the apparatus that I have? Your book gives an example of the ladder truck being in the shop. And that is always, that's a Murphy's Law thing, that when you need it, it's going to be in the shop. So you have to kind of anticipate some of those things. Do you need that second alarm, third alarm? And, it's a whole lot better to go ahead and call it than wait, so that you can go ahead. You can always cancel them if they're not needed. And then you have to make a decision. Decide. And decide on your strategy. Decide on those tactics. Are additional resources needed? Are we going to be in the offensive or defensive? And sometimes you may not know that till you get there. As we're talking about that, route there, and then you arrive on the scene, you get a better picture. Your book doesn't mention this, but certainly we always want to remember our 360 walk around that we need to do. Sometimes that gets forgotten. Sometimes we get overwhelmed. But at some point, somebody needs to do a 360. You need to establish means of egress for those. If you're doing an interior attack, what is going to be your means of egress? What are the other hazards that may exist? I'm about to make a mess here. What are the other hazards that might exist? Right. Sorry. In that particular situation. So size up is very, very important. And whether you do that or that incident commander does that when he gets there, usually it's first in person. Again, you're going to be looking at the SOPs for your particular department. And anytime that you have an incident, you want to do this. Your book mentions after action review. This kind of comes at the end, or does come at the end. You can do something called a hot wash. That's become popular. It's kind of a tailboard after action review. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What's going on? Everybody okay? That kind of a thing. On a particularly big incident or tragic incident or involved incident, you may do a formal after action review. And this is not a time to point fingers, blame, anything else. It's a time to learn. And those need to be handled very well. Now, when you're talking about a wildland fire and doing that size up, it's a little bit harder. And there's a lot of other things that you have to remember there. Again, location. You may not have a good location. It may have been a passerby that called in, saw smoke out there in that field or saw smoke in the woods. And so you've got to find the fire. Half the time that may be part of your battle. What's the size of the fire? What's burning? What is the fuel type? Your book mentions something like the slope and aspect that we certainly learn about when we learn how to be a wildland firefighter, but those things are important. What is the rate of spread? And then exposures, weather conditions, all of those sorts of things in that wildland fire that is a lot different from structural firefighting. We want to make sure that we give an accurate report on the radio. Everybody needs that information. We can't just go in and start fighting fire. We've got to tell people what that report is. Certainly, do we have the right location? You know, is the fire at the house number that was given, or is it next door, across the street, or around the corner? What is the size of the structure? We've all heard those, or hopefully, if you're in the service, you've heard those sizes. We have, you know, 2-story wood frame structure, residential structure. That lets us know this type of, or, you know, I was never good at determining square footage. We have a large commercial structure, that kind of thing. You know, people standing outside, looks like they've evacuated. Anything that you can do. Of course, we used ABCD sides. Some people use 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. It's easier than front, back, left, and right. To help us understand the building construction type of the structure. Can you tell where the fire is? Fully involved, 3/4 involved. You know, no smoke showing. No smoke showing doesn't mean there's no fire. What is the level of involvement? The exposures, houses, cars, barns, that kind of thing. Do you need additional resources? And then your objectives. What kind of mode are you going to go into? Is this going to be, are we going to go and do an interior attack, quick attack? All of those different kinds of things. You need to give that in your size up. And then as soon as you can, you want to get an all clear. There may be that the people are standing in the yard. This is a house at night, standing in the yard. They tell you everybody's out. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't search, but that helps you formulate your plan a little bit better. So those types of priorities, and it all happens so fast. And I think that that's where, you know, people have little cheat cards, and I think those are good. This is why we train. You train and you train. You know, you should train giving reports over the radio. Just to get in the habit, just to get in the practice, because all of that information is valuable. Again, what you want to do as that first on the scene person is paint that picture. I don't know what that was. You want to paint that picture for the incoming units and dispatch too, so that they know what's going on. They can paint a picture for themselves. Incident priorities, there is a term that we use. I think it's changed since I was around, but RECIO was one of those. Rescue, exposures, confinement, extinguishment, and overhaul. You may have heard them in different, you know, with different terms there, but certainly rescue is our most important thing. Life safety, stabilization of the incident, exposures that are not yet involved. It doesn't do us any good to save this house or to put water on the house in the middle if we're going to lose the 2 on either side. So exposures, taking care of your exposures, confining the fire, extinguishment as needed, overhaul, and of course salvage operations are very important. Overhaul and salvage kind of come together, but we want to make sure through overhaul that the fire is completely out, but through salvage we're making sure that we're not doing more damage, we're not doing it more harm. I know many times, you know, I'm sure it still happens today, but hopefully not as much, that we just pour water and pour water and pour water. Well, we really didn't need to, and we've caused more water damage than we have anything else. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about salvage and getting that taken care of as quickly as possible. And I do see now in the bottom of page 362 in your book, RECIO SV. I didn't have the SV in there, but that is for salvage and for the salvage piece of it. So salvage and ventilation, I'm sorry. Ventilation, again, the sooner that we can ventilate safely, the safer that we're going to be, and the sooner that we're going to reach resolution. So RECIO SV, rescue, exposures, confinement, extinguishment, overhaul, salvage, and ventilation. So you got that? Got that. The fire service is one of those fields where we are very quick to make anagrams out of things, and I love them because that's the way I remember stuff. Modes of attack, we have an offensive mode. This is where we are doing that interior attack. We're going to go inside the structure, whatever the situation may be. This is where we have to remember the risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little. If we know that if it's a rescue situation, a true rescue situation, but we also have to discern, is it a body recovery? And that's a really tough place to be. It's really tough. So you have to think about that. And there's nothing saying that you can't change your mode of attack. Once you commit to an offensive, there's no reason that you can't go defensive. Or the same thing with defensive, which is attacking the fire from the outside. The fire may be too large, it may be well established, the structure may be unsteady, may not, you probably shouldn't send people in there. Then this is going to be your defensive mode, your defensive attack. Again, you can go from defensive to offensive, you kind of get the fire under control from the outside, then you go into that offensive attack or interior attack, as we used to call it. There's also, like I said, combination where you can use both. This is a situation where they're both used in a combined attack mode. You have to be really careful with that to make sure that you're not putting others in danger. Your firefighter's interior in danger. There may be something, there's perimeter control, your book references that, where the flanks of the fire are being attacked directly. This may be wildland incidents is probably a good example of these. And then, as I said, it does require careful coordination. So those are the three different attack modes, fire attack modes that you will see. Now we talk about strategies and tactics, and then there's tasks that make up those tactics. So you see how we break it down. Tasks are things that should be completed in a specified period of time. And if you've ever looked at boy, the word just left me. I'll come up with it in a minute, but a plan, IAP, an incident action plan, you will see that it's kind of broken down that way of, what is our overall goal for that particular operational period? It may be for a 12-hour period. It may be for a 24-hour period for extended incidents. But it breaks it down by objective, by strategy, tactic, and the tasks involved in that. And then, of course, assignments of who is going to do those tasks. Communications is a big part of effective on-scene operations. You've got to communicate. Radios are a standard form of communication, and sometimes, especially when you're interior and you're trying to talk through that mask, and that maybe your low air alarm is going off, and you've got that muffled sound. Boy, it is really, really tough to understand and to communicate. So certainly a lot of practice comes through in that as well. You've got to make sure that there's coordination between what's going on the inside and what is going on the outside. If an interior crew is going to use a hose line as ventilation out the window to ventilate a structure, you probably need to tell the people on the outside that, So communication is key. The incident commander has to communicate the plan. He has to coordinate the plan, but he's got to communicate the end result to everyone that is there. Everybody needs to understand their responsibilities and do them. If for some reason they're not able to do them, they need to report that back to the incident commander and let them know. It's not a time to go freelancing. You can't don't shirk your duties. If you don't like your assignment, and I think there's a video I put up in one of the courses. I can't remember which one it was, but it's I'll have to find it. There's a guy that tells this great story about his assignment was to get the homeowner, the resident, some shoes, and the impact of that assignment. So, but if you don't like your assignment, then it's not the time to argue. Talk about it during your after action report. Talk about it one-on-one with the commander. But you need to do it right then. So usually there's a command post of some kind that is set up. It may not be, it may be a distance away. And that's a good thing because the incident commander doesn't need to be totally involved in the scene itself. They need the big picture, and they're going to wait for you as a sector, a division leader to give them that picture and to give them this information. It may be that we've got ventilation. We're going to ventilate before we make an interior. So we've got to make sure that everything is coordinated, that everything is reported as, we have completed that task. At Hall County, we had an on-deck area, is what they referred to it as, a staging area for personnel. It was not a staging area for engines and apparatus, but for personnel. It's usually at the bumper of a truck or the tailboard of a truck or engine. And this is where, when you completed your task, you went to on deck. Usually rehab was at the on deck area. But this way, the incident commander had a great, and usually there was an on deck leader. And so the incident commander had a great picture and idea about resources that were available. Also accountability, where people were. They hadn't completed their task and they were just laying out in the yard waiting for the next one when nobody knew they had completed it, or they didn't report back. So that was a great way for accountability as well. Communications is paramount. But also, our eyes and our ears and our experience become really huge when we're talking about on-scene operations. And we really kind of talked about structure fires in this, or I talked about it in this lecture, but think about vehicle accidents and the number of calls that we're hearing about where an emergency responder is struck on that while rendering aid in some form or fashion. So again, got to keep those eyes and ears open, your experience, communicate. There's a proper chain of communication, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to break right here and then pick it up and talk about the incident command system, about NIMS, and how that facilitates this organized and efficient process of on-scene. So I'm going to stop right here, and then so you stay tuned for part 2. It's coming up in just a few minutes. Thanks.